Om Adihi Sasam Yoga Namita Hetu. Kalas Trikala Kalopi Dristaha. Tam Vishvarupam Bhava Bhuta Mityam. Devam Svachitastam Upasya Purvam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in the chamber of your heart, who appears to you as the universe, and who is the ultimate source of all living beings. Perceive that one as the primal cause of the relationship between matter and spirit, and as the partless divine entity, transcending the three worlds, the five sheaths, the three gunas, and the three phases of time. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Nicho Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shantihi Shashvati Netaresham. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. The wise ones realize that one as dwelling in their own self. To them belong peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Broadcasting to all of you, live streaming and here present in the ashram on the big island of Hawaii today for our third class in a series of 5 classes on the Sanatana Dharma of India. Sanatana Dharma, Sanat means eternal, and Dharma means, of course, this path to God, or the truth or teachings that open up the path to God. And India, of course, that motherland, the motherhood of the motherland, where motherhood is particularly famous and pointed out because there Divine Mother of the Universe has her own scriptures, her own path, and also is seen as overseeing all other paths in India. So fitting today that here in the ashram before this class began, we had a slideshow on the Western women of Vedanta, and that's been a third showing that we've been enjoying over the last few months several times on our mainland ashrams in Portland and in Portland, Oregon. Hopefully we'll show it in San Francisco too one day. And then here in Hawaii. So very important to look back at our own history in America since 1893 when Swamiji brought this great Sanatana Dharmas to us. He brought the Vedanta specifically, but the Vedanta is a huge umbrella under which fall so many other darshanas, paths of clear seeing. You know, if you've tuned in on the first two classes, that India is no slouch at any level, anywhere in life, whether it be the inner life or the outer life. We saw philosophically how many paths there were in India in the first class 2 weeks ago. There were some 37 to 40 views or perspectives that we looked at that fell through non-dualism, qualified non-dualism, and dualism. That is Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Dvaita. And we also looked at that India also has so many darshanas, or so many sects and cults, main sects and cults, using those words in a positive sense because they have a negative connotation over here because of the misuse. But basically, Shaivism and Shaktism, worship of Shiva and Shakti, are very prominent from earliest times. And I must say, Sanatana Dharma means before time. And we have to realize that this isn't just the scriptures of India aren't just something that appeared over the last few thousand years when they try and cite their age, but that they are cycling all the time along with every other thing that cycles. Lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, jealousy, fear, called the 6 passions and 8 fetters, those cycle with people when these people cycle over long periods of times and many lifetimes. But what comes with them are these positive, powerful teachings that have somehow lodged themselves in a few minds that also come back with us. Jivan Muktas, Bodhisattvas, Avatars, Vibhutis, Ishvarakotis, they have names for them in India, souls that sacrifice themselves. So this slideshow we just saw here a few hours ago with Sister Nivedita, one of the European women actually who gave her life to India, just went and when she saw Swamiji and heard him speak, gave her entire life to helping the poor and impoverished in India, helping the women in India, the girls, starting girls' schools and so forth, and so many other of the Western women, as few as they were, who sent money to help establish these institutes of goodwill. And now so many of them around India, so many hundreds of ashramas and the Ramakrishna order and other lineages too. So these other lineages are always there. Vaishnavism and Ganapacha we looked at, worship of Ganesha, the elephant-headed god. Seems like nothing is too far-fetched or too odd for India either. You even have worship of thousands and hundreds and thousands of beings worshipping an elephant-headed god of all things. Well, there's a very beautiful story around how Ganesh got his elephant's head that you'll have to look into. But there's another area in which India is no slouch in the religious history, that in religion itself it's called itihasa, all these rich stories of saints and seers and kings and warriors and low-class beings and untouchables, all mixing together in this huge melting pot of stories with high religious morals. Nothing silly in their stories. Nothing grim, if you know what I mean. Grimm's fairy tales. They weren't raised on that kind of thing. That is fantasy and so forth. These stories had very high moral messages, and when you're raised with them as a Hindu child, then you're well equipped for teachings that come after that. That is, subsequent to the dualism that you've been raised in, this rich love of God and the soul, Jiva and Shiva. So we know on all levels that India has this wonderful abundance of teachings to offer us. And when we look at the word Dharma, Sanatana Dharma particularly, we have an opportunity to look into that, which we did. And last week we also took up some very powerful visuals, in these charts that I like to bring and show to people to go with the oral transmission. You have to see and hear both as much as you can about divine reality, especially in this day and age called the Kali Yuga, because then it will bring back to you some of these divine memories you have. A word in India is called smriti. When we think about memory here, we think maybe about reminiscences and sentimentalism and pictures of our ancestors or pictures of things we've done on our vacation, or memorizing some lower knowledge, some secular knowledge so that we can pass a test. But in India, this is divine memory. The word smriti means something that's lodged back in your subtle and causal mind, not just your brain, as Vivekananda used to say, but in your heart. See, that Atman has its citadel in the heart. There's a chart here I want to show about the citadel of the Atman and where it dwells. So we have teachings in India that specifically pertain to Brahman, non-dual formless awareness. That's the thread that hooks all the pearls together. And we have teachings in India that then are specifically geared towards you and your true nature. So Brahman and Atman, basically that is. They're one and the same, like water inside and outside a jar, or air inside a clay pot and outside a clay pot. They're one and the same, but this clay pot or this jar is the thing that you need to take to task. And that's an insentient barrier between your sentience, that is your Purusha or your Atman, and Brahman, that is all pervasive, outside of all objects, permeating all objects. So there are teachings that pertain specifically to the absolute reality beyond name and form, and then that portion of that nameless, formless Brahman that got positioned somehow in these 5 sheets. That's why I chanted Adihi Sa Samyoga Nimitta Hetu, that we must meditate upon the Lord as our own self in our heart. See, because then we'll begin to know that we do have a real self that transcends the ego, because the ego is always usurping that real self and sending it to the background, and then grasping at selfish grasping is the ego's, the unripe ego's penchant, you see. So we need to quell that, put a stop on that, and bring the true self forward. Then when we have that true self in view, we can connect it, that is, we can show that it's one with Brahman. We can just break that jar and let air become one with air, water become one with water. Those are some of the esoteric and radical teachings of Advaita Vedanta, how this oneness is really ever true and always true, Sanatana, eternal, but at the same time there are these false superpositions that are being foisted over that truth. And those are curtains or veils that you need to strip away. Now there are also a whole set of teachings specific to India's Sanatana Dharma that have to do with practice, in case you cannot understand the words that were just coming out of my mouth. If you can't understand those words about the oneness between Jiva and Shiva, or Brahman and Atman and Purusha and Prakriti, Prakriti getting into a whole other area of insentient matter, both formless and form, then you need to do a practice that will remove some of these veils. See, we have some very beautiful teachings about that. Sometimes we chant Om Satyena Labhyastapasa Hyesa Atman Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha. A lot of my students have memorized that quote because it's very much in accord with this teaching of false superimposition. That is, this Atman is realized by tapas, you see, samyag jnanena, and also by truth and knowledge, jnanam, you see. And all of these have to be constantly cultivated, though, for a while, until these veils fall away, because these veils have come back just as a matter of course, like Ramakrishna said, like scum coming over the surface of a lake, and you're going to have to push it away, and then it'll come back again, dancing back, and you push it away again, finally you push it away further, till you get the long view of yourself, see. It's not just to take a drink of water that you do that, but the real teaching of water and reflection is there's the true self, and it's being covered by various things that are insentient and all a part of the non-self or anatman, or ego, So a whole series of teachings in India is dedicated to that area called sadhana, or spiritual practice. Before we turned the cameras on today, we were having a talk here amongst ourselves after that slideshow on Western women in Vedanta, and I was saying how it's very hard to find sadhana in families anywhere, in any religion in the world today. You'll find it in India, though, beings doing sadhana. Not just monks. They're supposed to do that. That's why they renounced the world. But even householders then need to keep these Dharmic teachings going and giving them to their children, because that's how they got to us, through a series of parents and their children and grandchildren. So that's important, because if you're not giving these teachings to your children, then the circle gets broken, and we must keep that circle unbroken. That is, these cycles, if there are many cycles called cycles of samsara, cycles of ignorance, cycles of time, then we must also make sure that we keep these cycles of dharma and these cycles of practice and these cycles of truth also there with them. If we can't do anything about removing the cycles of time, space, name, form, and karma, causality, if it's too difficult to deal with that on a collective level, then at least what we need to do is bring back those things in cycles that are powerful protectors, that are healers, and that are revelation to us, and insights into the Dharma. We need those as much as possible, and we need people here in the West who are gaining those insights and then passing them on to their children. I don't have any small children myself, any blood children, but you're all my children. I'm passing it to you. I'm passing these teachings, and I've been doing it for over 30 years. And these are Dharmic teachings that are authentic, and they are traditional. And I made sure to take initiation, mantra diksha in India. I made sure to take Indian swamis as teachers, and so that I would get the undiluted teachings given to me, so that I could contemplate them, gain some insight out of them, and then pass them on with all assurance. See, that's what a teacher, a true guru, should do, is make sure these Dharma teachings are made manifest and expressed in all the years of his life, with every breath that he or she could possibly muster. And so there's so many temperaments out there, and so many predicaments people are in. Their condition is in different kinds of levels of awareness or unawareness, as the case may be. But we must remember one thing about that. When Lord Buddha was asked about his pronouncement about the two kinds of beings, there are those who are awakened and those who are asleep. And then one of his students asked him, but aren't also those present who are awakening? And he said, those are already awake. They just don't know it yet. So if you have any kind of movement towards, that is away from being asleep and towards awakening, spiritually speaking, even philosophically speaking, I'd say even religiously speaking, if you use religion with a capital R and not what it's become conventionally, then you're already awake. You're already on the path, and all you need to do is just hone and refine your awareness. And the best way to do that is going to be through teachings and practice, dharma and sadhana. So India majors in that, you see, because there's not that many people come to this earth who are enlightened. We see precious few, even in India, and India's given us the most. You see, it's nothing new to India to see a Christ child come. They've had many fabulous, magnificent children born to them that, if they wanted to, could do miracles and so forth, but they were actually more concerned with passing the Dharma, like Shankara at the age of 8 knew all the teachings of India. And he was teaching graybeards by the time he was in his early teens. So this is a great soul, and there are many of these born in India that come armed with this memory of having lived lifetimes in an enlightened state. See, they don't come here to enjoy or to struggle or to suffer. They come here if, for any reason, is to help awaken you. So there I've given you three major points of Sanatana Dharma: Brahman, Atman, and Sadhana and Dharma. Those three we've been looking at via various charts. Now, today we had this film showing before we started here called Western Women in Vedanta. When we look back on our own heritage, back to 1893 when Swami Vivekananda brought this Dharma to us, that's given us 100 and some years, you see, to see how it's affected us. We can look at our whole culture and see, has Vedanta worked its way very deeply into our hearts and minds? Has it helped us to awaken our samskaras, that is, our subtle memory, about having heard this truth before, and if you want to put it very succinctly, having come from the light before we were born in the mother's womb. We came out of the light, but how many of us remember that? You see, when Maya, the curtain of Maya comes down in this relative world, relativity all around us, and reality gets blocked out, you see, by these coverings, by these veils, by these false superimpositions. As soon as you take on a body and five senses, those are false superimpositions. Those are conditionings or limitations to yourself. And those who get attached to the five senses make it worse and create karma. They get attached to objects as if they were real, and then they suffer as a result. But those of us who can use the five senses to see beyond, that is, we can actually take the five senses back from the objects and use them to find the five subtle senses in dream, and then back to find the third eye, which is a kind of, and the inner ear, which are even subtler levels of our senses. Then you get the idea of where consciousness originates from and how it moves through layers, and you'll be able to withdraw it from those false superimpositions, and thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That's basically, in a nutshell, what happens. But if consciousness comes out through the five senses, because the senses are outward going by nature, that's a quote out of the Mundaka Upanishad, the senses are defective because they're outward going by nature. So if you can turn the energy that's coming through the senses inward and turn off the outer senses like you do tonight in sleep and in dream, or like you try and do in meditation, or that you'll be forced to do at the time of leaving your body, you'll get some experience of what inner life is like. I ask you, where are the kingdoms of heaven within? He did say within, right? He didn't say above or high. So if you're looking for some big fella in the sky with a beard on a cloud, or if you think your ancestors are floating up above the earth or coming from other planets, and of course you're not understanding the teachings of the great ones, they know that my Father's mansion has many chambers, and these chambers are inside. They're internal in nature. They consist of intelligence. Intelligence is the first compound after consciousness. That's how Vivekananda put it. So consciousness first, and then intelligence. After intelligence, then all of these worlds and all of these objects. Three of them, or sometimes 7 lokas, they call it. If you recite the Gayatri Mantra every day, you're pretty much saying that to yourself. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. We want peace, peace, peace on the levels of Bhur Bhuva Swaha. And that's the essential message of that Gayatri teaching. And it comes from Mother Gayatri herself. So, being the mother of wisdom, she knows what is best for you. And if you sit up and take heed, sit up means get into a asana, and breathe, and open your intelligence, and shut off your outer senses, and start to find your inner senses, then you will have these insights we're talking about in the Dharma, and these realizations will come after the insights, and the realization itself will come. Now that's another area which we looked at last week. Remember, I'm sort of reiterating the 7 ideals. Remember the chart we ended with last week at this class? If not, your memory isn't that good yet, then look back on the live streaming classes and on our website and so forth, and see if you can take another look at that chart, the 7 major ideals of India. So another way of saying this then is India, Sanatana Dharma concentrates upon nirvana or samadhi, or what is called in Zen satori, or in other religions too has names for it. See, asampragyata in yoga. So that's a whole other ideal that the soul wants to attain samadhi. Nameless, formless, beyond time and space, and transcendent of karma. Not only the senses will have to be shut off, but the body will have to be given up, and the ego will have to be made transparent. See, Sri Ramakrishna said you'll never get rid of the ego as long as you have a body, because the ego is the first principle. You see, it's the first tattva that moves everything else. Mind and intelligence and all of that, or intellect we should say, are there with the ego at a very early inception of this body-mind mechanism. And consciousness is using these as instruments. But the instruments become the users instead of consciousness. Then you've got a condition that leads to bondage and suffering. So we're always talking about, I wish there was suffering would go away, I wish we could alleviate suffering, I wish we could free people, yet we're not willing to clarify our minds as to how suffering starts in the first place. That is, suffering is the first noble truth of Buddhism, right? Suffering is. What part of that statement do you not understand, as the saying goes? You see, you're still thinking that there's lasting pleasure, or that there's contentment and peace or fulfillment in this world, in this life, but suffering is, he said. And there's a cause for it next. And then there's a way out of it, you see. So you take these steps in any of India's tradition, because I'm quoting Buddha because Buddhism is one of India's traditions. It's no different from Vedanta in that way. It might have branched a little bit away from Vedas at the time Buddha was living, because the Vedas had fallen from their original perch, but you have to essentially see them as India's windows in this rooms in this chamber, you see, in this mansion of Indian Sanatana Dharma. So if you can look at it that way, then you see these teachings correlate with each other perfectly. And you're going to want to then draw consciousness back towards this 4th grade ideal I'm just talking about here, nirvana. You want to experience nameless, formless peace that passes all understanding. And there's peace times 3, but then there's a peace that passes all understanding as well. See, and that would be something like the pearl of great price. You see, something that's priceless, whereas everything else has less value. But this is the one thing that's priceless, has no price on it, cannot be tagged that way. So that's the kind of peace that's comes with nirvana or with samadhi. Those are the 2 most ready words India has for that non-dual condition of consciousness in its original state. That is beyond beginnings, middles, and ends, because everything else has cycling. But this consciousness is the witness of all the cycles. That's why we often chant, my teacher used to often chant all the time, Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tatmama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachulam Sarvati Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. So basically beyond the 3 gunas, and also the witness, Sakshi Bhutam, of all phenomena. So phenomena is coming in cycles through this wheels of samsara, or the Kala Chakra, Buddha called it, And the witness consciousness is always standing back and seeing that happen, sort of like a tempest in a teapot, you see. Consciousness is unaffected by everything that goes on in these cycles, no matter how magnificent or chaotic or magically wonderful they may seem to be. Consciousness is just not interested in that. See, remember one of those paths we looked at 2 weeks ago? Is that it's like Ramanuja's idea that consciousness, a bit of consciousness, Brahman, becomes the worlds of name and form and time and space. Whereas in Advaita you would say, that Brahman doesn't transform, so that can't happen. But then there's this little wiggle room in there in the non-dualistic, the qualified non-dualistic path about a portion of Brahman becoming the worlds of name and form and time and space. So if you have these perspectives there to look at, then you'll be able to understand on many levels. And you probably shouldn't worry yourself about not understanding the highest level, if such a thing even exists. Because by the time you get to the highest level, levels won't exist. You'll just see yourself. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart. Right, the first words I said today. So, as levels go, however, then if you visit them with your consciousness, even the very lowest, hardest level, like Sister Nivedita going to India and trying to save children off the street and putting them in girls' schools and so forth, if you have to even go to that level of consciousness, it's become so preponderant and heavy and weighty and full of karma and suffering and so forth, then you'll be armed with the perspective for that particular level of consciousness that you need. See, so you man yourself up, and your consciousness becomes that flexible to be able to shift between these different positions. It's a very important facet of Sanatana Dharma. The soul must become facile and agile in the realms of name and form. And it's easy to do in the realm of the Trinity, see, where everything is sweet and sattvic and beautiful, but lands, chambers of the Father's mansion that are on lower floors, and maybe even the basement, like this world is a basement. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, put on your white clothes and you're going to the temple, you see, but then you remember, I have to go downstairs and turn off the furnace, see. So you're very careful when you go down there in your white clothes, you see, and you turn off the furnace, come back. As soon as you reach upstairs, you realize some soot got on the cuffs of your pants and maybe on, the elbow and so forth. So if you come to this world, he said, not be able to get out of it without some little smudge or smear like that. This karma is waiting there. And so the best solution for that is to arm yourself with these spiritual perspectives. I got so into teaching this a couple years ago that I finally put out a book that I named Manasana. It was called Mental Postures, because I was looking around and seeing people in the West doing physical postures, and it wasn't really helping them at all, except maybe a little physically. And breathing exercises too weren't helping them at all, because they didn't find the prana and control the prana. They were just controlling their lungs. So you have something like Manasana. I put out a whole book of spiritual postures that a person can entertain on 3 different levels. One that heals, one that's spiritual, and one that's transcendent. So you take a posture at a healing level. If you find something limited in you, something demeaning, something imperfect, even ill, you see, then you take a mental posture and you hold it for a while in order for that to go away. Like, for instance, a posture like the Atman never gets sick, the Atman never dies, the Atman never suffers. You can take a posture like that, see, and it'll change the makeup of the way you think, and that'll change everything from thought on down, right down to the very body. Or you could take a spiritual posture, or you could take a transcendent posture. I am Atma Brahma asana would be a transcendent posture. This self is Brahman. And you sit in that realization for as long as it takes for you to realize that Jiva is one with Shiva. So that's another of the great ideals of Sanatana Dharma. We also talked about Ishvara. So for those who can understand Brahman and the unity of their own self with Brahman, their makeup is not that way yet, you see, or they follow a different path, like a more path of self-surrender, a path of sacrifice, a path of devotion. Then they might want to study India's abundance of wisdom on Ishvara and avatars. See how these great souls come again age to age, armed with these great teachings. From the highest floor of the chamber of God's mansion down right to the basement, they will come and help all kinds of beings and take on the karma themselves and neutralize it. There's a whole series of teachings by our own Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi. See that there's the Ishtam, or the Ishvari of this organization called SRB Associations, my teacher's teacher. There's a whole set of teachings by her on the greatness of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa as the recent avatar of the age, and how he has come here to help so many beings out of suffering. Some 5 million people now have found out about it in a very short time, since 1838 or so when he was born onwards. It's a very short time really for a great soul like that become known. So beings are turning towards this great soul, this great master. She used to say, and Vivekananda said something of the same kind, that Kali Yuga ended and the Satya Yuga began again when Sri Ramakrishna was born. So for those beings who want to climb off the wheel of time with its 4 phases, that is, its 3 sections and its 4 phases, then they can move to the Satya Yuga by following this great soul, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. That is the Ishvara form of the present day and age. And so that's another great ideal that we talked about last week in terms of trying to estimate or understand how great India is, philosophically, religiously, spiritually, intellectually, and so forth. So that's enough of a review to get your minds moving in the Dharma again. What I wanted to look at today was the options. That is, people seem to have many distractions. And if they don't want to think about God, they don't want to, if they're not philosophers, highfalutin philosophers or armchair philosophers, either one, then, and they're not religiously inclined, because who can blame them, because conventional religion really has made a muck of things lately. And fundamentalism and dogmatism and so forth. In all countries, in all religions, it's a problem. People are not going there anymore, not interested. So whatever the case may be, then you'll have this, where do people go for options? And so you might say, tongue-in-cheek, the religion of the West is science. And that's a teacher for them. It's going to be something that's available for them to go to. And of course, people of non-religious orientation will take to it fairly swiftly, but you're going to have a certain kind of intelligence that's also necessary to understand it, because quantum physics and so forth are looking into the outer spaces, not only just outer space as it were, but the inner spaces of the outer body, like atoms and quarks and protons and neutrons and subatomic particles and so forth. In fact, so much so that my teacher, who was a Swami here in the West for so many years, said that they're talking as if this is the age of the atom, but I disagree. It's the age of the Atman. So since Sri Ramakrishna has come, he figures now you can give up your death grasp on the atomic particle, the purely physical, and you can begin to remember and regenerate and bring back to the fore, through healing and through spirituality and through transcendence, whichever way you want, whichever liberation you want to pursue, this great Dharma that's hiding inside of you. See, the kingdoms of heaven within you, you could make a case for that to be all of these lokas or akashas. That is, my Father's mansion has many chambers, but you could also make a case for it that what he was talking about was this world of teachings are within you. The kingdom of heaven could be this world of enlightening teachings called the Dharma. In India's Sanatana Dharma, it has been collected by the rishis and the seers and their children and their children's children for thousands of years in this cycle alone. And so we have these ways of looking at it, but then we have these fallback positions if, God forbid, we start to think that these ancient teachings don't have any facility here anymore. See, those are outmoded and outdated, people say. But that's not what we're finding, those of us who meditate upon them. We're finding them to be not only living, but eternally living, Sanatana Dharma. This is the cure-all for everything, is bringing Dharma back to this world. And hopefully people can remember it. They can dig back deep enough into their minds where it's stored and uncover this great treasure of Sanatana Dharma. Now, in order to do that in the West, and the West might as well mean everywhere now, because, like we said, even India is having a hard time with materialism, pleasurable life, coveting objects, and the kind of things which the West has become famous for, and without any guilt or shame around it. They're just openly materialistic. And seeking the world for more resources to add to the stores that they already have. In contrast, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa could not own a thing. If anyone gave him something, he would become disoriented. So once he had a little pain in his leg, and he was at a householder's house, and so the householder gave him a grain or two of opium and put it in a cloth, you see. So here, take this later, it'll be good for the pain in your leg. So Sri Ramakrishna walked to the Kali temple where he was staying, and he couldn't find it. And he took out the few grains of medicine and threw them away, and immediately he found his way home. So if he thought of storing up anything for the future, it went completely against his nature. He had a hard time closing doors, buttoning a shirt. Everything to him was wide open and had to stay wide open, and anything that posed a problem to close or to contain, like, say, even the soul being contained in this body was a problem to him. So he would always go into a samadhi. That's why we have to study samadhi and nirvana a little bit, so we'll know what it was he was doing when he left his body. Otherwise we'll make up or fantasize about all sorts of strange things. Once he and Sri Sharda Devi, she was very young at the time, and he would stay up late at night and not sleep, and he would go into samadhi, and then he'd keep her up all night talking about God. So she never started not to get any sleep. So she had to move to the Nahabat nearby and sleep there, because he was always talking about God and he was always in samadhi. So he came out of samadhi one night and said, I was just with the white people. The white people, I'll have many, many devotees in the future among these white people. They're very pure and very beautiful. So that gives us something to hope for. Where he was in his samadhi, what land he was in, what loka or what location he was in. Locus, is very important where consciousness goes. We don't know, but nonetheless, Sri Sharda Devi herself later also told, I think even Advaita, I'll have many, many children among the white people, among the Caucasians, will become my children. And that's become true. So, this is going to be a matter of great faith then for people, recovering faith, and not just belief, because belief, beyond belief, mere belief is faith, they say in India. This faith is rock solid and is built upon one's own spiritual experience. And Sri Ramakrishna was very, very big on spiritual experience. He wanted that to be your main focus right now, not just book learning and so forth, but actually translate some of this into direct spiritual experience by contemplating it in your mind, because it's in your mind where it's stored, not in the book. You become too attached to books, you think them, then you're worshiping libraries, you see, you're bowing down before dusty old tomes and so forth, without ever knowing that all of that was in here to begin with. So you read all of that, only to find out that it's within you. You see, all knowledge lies within you, which could be another interpretation for Christ saying the kingdom of heaven is within you. All this knowledge is within you, yoga says. It's the first law of 7 laws of yoga. All knowledge lies within you. So good, you took it out and put it in a book so someone else could realize that. But as you realize it, you can't forget that it all began with you. You see, it's all your wisdom, and you with a capital Y, we should say. And you need to locate it again, because then you can access it, and you won't have to spend so much time on your knees before dusty old tomes, or trying to save some old libraries, you see. So this is more a matter of direct spiritual experience. Another great facet of India is not to leave the Vedas and the Upanishads and the wisdom that they contained just in books, but to actually bring them out into life and manifest them. Now, that's going to take some faith, it's going to take some understanding. Now, this chart I put up here is a way of saying that what we're up against when we have this loss of memory of our true nature, and then we're born amongst people who are materialists, our parents being materialists, they've been taught by their parents. All of them, the whole race has been taught by politics and business and government, it's been oriented toward that, and even religion has fallen into that problem of seeking money. The old money-making problem, or the eternal money-making, as Vivekananda used to call it. So when that happens, then these are the other places people can go with their consciousness, is what I'm saying. India comes back again and again and warns them away from this. So in terms of these great ideals that we've just gone through, that are a part of Sanatana Dharma, I've listed them here on the left-hand column and put them across the board with equivalents that you would find in a way of thinking about a materialist might view it. So I've called it Vedantic and conventional views of birth and death. Now on one side you would call it Vedantic superimposition or projection, and the other kind the creational theory. The creation theory or the conventional view. So again, if you pick up the complete works of Vivekananda and start reading them, immediately he will start taking to task this creational view and the theory of creation and so forth. And he will start telling you that heaven is rather a glib subject for the Vedantists. If you bring up creation, if you bring up heaven and so forth, that's not one of the great ideals that India wants to talk about. It wants to talk about Brahman, it wants to talk about Atman and its oneness with Brahman, I and my Father are one. It wants to talk about Ishvara, the great souls. It wants to talk about Nirvana, the highest experience of consciousness. It wants to talk about the Dharma and its teachings. I'm reiterating again, right? All the things we just brought forth. This is what India Sanatana Dharma focuses on. This is what it majors in this university of the world, and always has. And it pretty much eschews the other, to such an extent sometimes that people think it's a negative kind of approach. Oh, you don't like the world. Well, the world is suffering. Of course we don't like it. And besides, Vivekananda would be quick to point out, there is no such thing as a world. There is no God in the world either. The world is in God. So if you want to find true worlds, then you'll have to find worlds not made of matter, but made of thinking. If you can get to an intellectual position, then you've got an advantage or a hand up over all other peoples who are still materialists, because then you begin to visit, without even knowing it at first, the subtle mind. So you've gone to the second world. Most people don't know this. The mind is the second world. When you say Bhur Bhuva Swaha, or you say the three worlds, or you say gross, subtle, and causal, when you start thinking, you've actually made a quick shift of consciousness to the second world. The U of Om, right? A-U-M. I brought a chart about that too. So, but since the move is so swift, and you're back and forth from the mind to the world, whether you're waking or in dreaming, it happens, then you don't realize that the consciousness has actually gone to a subtle world. Now, to realize it means you're going to have to shut off the waking state first and put your consciousness all in the subtle mind. Shut off the gross mind and what it thinks about, what it's attracted to, what it runs after. Superficiality, convention, mundane things, you see, day-to-day occurrences and so forth, that actually don't bring you any peace at all anyway. So why not just put them off for a while? See? And now you focus your shift to the subtle. And now you've actually gone to another world. And the way you can tell that is because you're not thinking about the gross world anymore. That habit has been broken. You see, it becomes a habit to think about gross things. And the mind becomes gross, therefore the consciousness becomes gross, and therefore you forget about the subtle, sukshma, and you forget about the causal. The causal is still even further back within you. The causal mind, the causal world. There's no form there. That's what you would feel in deep sleep tonight. Why you feel so great in deep sleep is you visited the causal world. See, the M of Om, where everything went, you see? And the M ended it all, you see. And that's what deep sleep is like. It ends form. And samadhi will be the ultimate end of form. Because out of the M, you'll come back to the A and U, won't you? And that's a cycle. It's actually a description of the Kala Chakra that's at an intellectual level rather than just a level of suffering. See? Because most people, they enjoy and suffer. So their idea of moving in cycles would be relegated just to that, enjoyment and suffering. That's all. But if somebody were to develop an idea of the presence of cycles based upon the word Om, and based upon the idea that there are three worlds within them, gross, subtle, and causal, then they could turn off the gross and they could waken up the subtle. And intellectuals, as I'm saying, have done this. They'll spend whole hours just thinking about things. And as long as they're thinking about things, this world doesn't exist to them. Sort of like you reading a book and forgetting about your toothache. But as soon as you put the book down, ow. You know. So your consciousness actually can shift away from gross things and can spend huge amounts of time just thinking. So that's really the first door opening into the possibility of spirituality. And so science has made that jump. We've been talking about it lately. It's not jumping to any belief or faith-based tradition, that's for sure. Not most of them aren't. But it is jumping to this level of subtle mind. So it has an opportunity to waken up to these precious truths that are contained there. Now, looking at this, just know that these two categories are there. There's what's called Vedantic superimposition. The word for that is Vivarta or Adhyasa. Vedanta basically thinks that everything that's not Brahman is a false superimposition over Brahman. Any form, any name, the presence of time, the presence of space, objects, and karma that comes from having commerce or experiences with objects is not Brahman. It's a false superimposition simply by the very fact that it has name, form, time, space, and causation associated with it. Because those five go away in samadhi. So it's why you wanted to study in the Sanatana Dharma what samadhi is to the realized soul. Even if it's only an intellectual hearing, oh, I see what they're on about, you see. I haven't had the experience yet, but I see that so many hundreds of souls have had samadhi. Buddha had nirvana under the bo tree. Christ had beatific vision under the in the forest, on the mount, and so forth, in the wilderness. So these souls in different traditions have had this experience. So therefore I know that there's something afoot there, you see. So anything that gets in the way of that samadhi then is a false superimposition. And that's Vedanta's view, basically. That's how you practice discrimination, or take up the sort of discrimination and cut away name and form, time, space, and causality completely, and get yourself free. See? It's also called, other words than vivarta is called adhyasa. It also means a covering or a false superimposition. Now, it's not really an aside, but if you took Tantra's philosophy, then they would call these containers, names, forms, time, space, causality. Basically, they're looking at these as containers for consciousness. So it's not such a hand slap when you go to Tantra. So Vedanta wants you up and out of that into samadhi, but Tantra is saying, well, look at how consciousness occupies these things. And so it's a little bit different, two different streams there. Vedanta and Tantra have been running in India from time out of mind, and they've mingled their waters and come apart, mingled their waters and come apart so often that it's sometimes hard to recognize which is which. But we know at the Advaita Vedanta level that as long as name and form persists, then consciousness can't exist. You won't become aware of consciousness as long as these things persist as false superimpositions. So this is a directive for the Vedantic aspirant. And if you wanted to try and apply it to the scientist, good luck with that. See? Because, number one, there's no consciousness as the origin. See, they're not looking at consciousness as the origin to everything. They're thinking about it as something that comes after the sperm and the ovum, the fetus, the baby, the child, the brain, and then intelligence. Intelligence comes at the end, so it's a product of physics, of physical orientation, of evolution. But to the Hindu, it's all different. Consciousness came first, and these things came after. You'd have a very hard time convincing the physicist or the materialist about that, because Maya is making it look entirely opposite through evolution. Through the march of the hominidae, for instance, over these 50 million years and so forth. So, and that's just a small portion of how long the world has been in existence. So it's been ingrained in the mind that this evolutionary theories, it's going to be very hard to undermine this in any way and cause them to think differently. Because once they hear about an idea, this is a quote from Vivekananda, when the human mind is very conservative, when it hears an idea and it does something, it sticks to that. So it's very hard to introduce new ideas to the human mind. This is almost a direct quote from Swami Vivekananda. Very hard to introduce new ideas to the human mind. So somebody who's been trained even for a few hundred years in science, or for a few hundred years in the creation theory, is going to be very difficult to get them to entertain any new idea. Even though that idea might just be thrilling. It might just be dripping with freedom. So it might be as exciting as you could possibly get, philosophically speaking. And here's what I mean by that. So here on the left is principle of manifestation by unreal superimposition. That is, there's apparent transformation going on here, according to Vedanta, but it's not real transformation, because Brahman cannot transform itself into anything. All is Brahman. And when it transforms itself, that's just an appearance. Probably the easiest word to use in English is appearance, like mirage in the desert. It's an appearance that's not really there. See? So when that comes up, the trained Advaitin and Vedantist, or a trained spiritual aspirant, will look through it or past it and beyond it. He won't accept what he sees with these five senses as being true, because they're limited, number one, and number two, they're outgoing by nature. And he's moving inward. Kingdoms of heaven are within, he thinks, That's what he's heard. My Father's mansion has many chambers, so he wants to explore these. And he knows these are not anywhere in the realm of the tactile senses, anywhere outward. You can't find him. He's already looked. We've already looked. Astronomy's already looked. Astrology's already looked. Science has already looked. So we're looking outward and we're taking that to be real. That's the predicament here, you see. Now, so the first thing to encounter in the thrilling way that Vedanta would put this is Ajativada. It's one of the main pillars of Advaita Vedanta. Sanatana Dharma says there's been no origination ever. Non-origination is probably the most precious truth that India has to give us, that there's no origin to anything. That is, beginnings, middles, and ends? No, only appearances. That's false superimposition at the level of the cosmic mind. So even the cosmic mind is foisting these three upon us. So beginnings, middles, and ends seem to be real. If you're on this side of the board, you're thinking theory of origins, you see, then whether you're looking at it through religion, seven-day creation theory, that God created the world in 7 days and the first day was the creation, or whether you're looking at it in terms of science, a 4,320,000,000 long cycle that has an end and no return, that had a beginning, it has an end, and it has no involution associated with it. It's all evolution. Then you'll find out that this is counter to what Vedanta is telling you. So Vedanta isn't just walking up or waltzing up to the scientist or to the fundamentalist and saying, guess what? You're wrong. See, because it's actually going beyond both all sorts of realms of doubts and just saying, Ajativada is the truth. It's non-origination we're talking about. There was no origin to anything. And we can prove that by putting you into samadhi. Here, just follow this practice. Get into samadhi and you will transcend evolution. And you will also transcend rebirth. Of course, that's coming later, but these are the things that the radical and thrilling teaching of Ajativada, as proposed by Sri Krishna in the Gita, for instance, is telling us. No beginning and middle and end to anything, no matter what the appearances are. It's just non-origination. There never was a time when anything was created, you see, and there'll never come a time when anything's destroyed because everything is non-originated. Like Sri Ram says, the destruction of all things and all beings is only the return to their source. See? So the idea of creation and destruction there is a false superimposition over the soul, which is birthless and deathless. And timeless, so if anything happening in time would also be a false superimposition. And spaceless, so anything happening in the three worlds would also be a false superimposition. A play, if you will, or an expression, if you like, or a reflection, or if you really want to be harsh, an illusion. It's an outright illusion. And if you looked back at those 37 paths that I showed you 2 weeks ago, you'd find out that this is where these perspectives are falling. They're treating the cosmos, and when we say cosmos, we don't just mean the physical universe, we mean the universes inside of us. The realms of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and so forth, the kingdoms of heaven within. They're also treating those in the same way as false superimpositions. Next on the line there is aparinama, non-transformation. Spirit projects matter, but on the other side, they believe in parinama. There's transformation going on. It's called evolution, and spirit becomes matter. That's if you think in terms of religion. If you think in terms of science, there's no spirit to begin with. I have another version of this chart that has 3 categories, that takes the second category and puts it into 2. That is the religious view and the scientific view. But this is pretty much putting together both science and religion and the way they think about it as compared to India and its Sanatana Dharma. So first off the bat, if you want to understand India's way of thinking, or getting beyond thought, if you would rather, a Jativada and a Parinama are the two pillars of non-dual thought, non-duality, Advaita Vedanta. There is no beginning, middle, and end. There's no origin to anything. It's endless, it's eternal. Everything is. And number two, there's no transformation going on. It's all apparent. But you're not going to understand that until this eye opens. You see the truth. Then you'll get beyond transformation. If you're looking through these 5 senses out here, then transformation feels real to you. You're feeling pain and pleasure from the objects and so forth. But in deep sleep or in dream, you're not getting pain and pleasure from objects. It's not the same. It's transformed itself. So as the deeper you get into this level of non-duality, the swifter and faster go away these presuppositions or these misfiances of your mind. India calls them Bhranti Darshana, false seeing. You've been living under false seeing for all this time, but the closer you get back to your true self, these start to fall away. You don't believe in them anymore. You're not going to be an evolutionist. You're not going to believe in 7-day creation theory. You're not going to believe in heaven with your ancestors. All of those are going away. And you're only going to believe in the one self in all. Timeless, birthless, deathless, with no transformation in it and no origin. The first of those paths we looked at 2 weeks ago on the chart, the Sanatana Dharma of India, are the best representatives of those two. Across the board, you're believing in transformation. You're believing in it down to the nth degree. In fact, you believe in it so much you want to study it. You want to study Saturn's rings. You want to study the paramecium. You want to study every little bit of matter in the universe to see if it has any secret for you whatsoever. But it's constantly changing in front of your 5 senses. And until you find out that that's all the work of what the seers have called Maya, transformation is going on in Maya, not in the soul. If you buy into Maya, then you're going to believe in transformation, and you're going to believe in change. But the changeless escapes you, entirely escapes you. What is immutable doesn't occur to you. You're only in the realm of mutability or relativity. The third list there is cosmic materials are ever present but subtle and undetected. So if you're coming out of the non-dual here to the qualified, there are materials inside the mind, in the cosmic mind, that are always present, but they're subtle and undetected by you. Like in your deep sleep state tonight, all the worlds are there, but you're not seeing them. They're there in seed form, but you're not aware of them. So you're never aware that out of your deep sleep comes dream, and out of dream comes waking. That waking and dream both depend upon deep sleep. That the seeds got watered here in dream, and then they grew into objects in waking. But both of those came from seeds in your deep sleep state. So you'll never be aware of that. You'll never think that way, see, because you can't make your way inside. Basically, because you don't know that nature has an unmanifested side to it, a seed state. That's basically what Christ was telling John when he said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Is that there's a seed state called the Word, where everything will come out of it. It's just pure intelligence is what it is. Well, maybe not pure intelligence, but it's the highest intelligence. The first compound out of consciousness is this intelligence that creates the worlds. That is, projects them. Because remember, we're talking about projection as opposed to creation. Projection is a different thing. Projection happens, and the thing projected isn't real. So it's sort of like a hologram. So you can put your hand through it. But when creation happens, the idea is that the thing becomes solid, and that solid thing is real, and you can't put your hand through it. You can't see through it. It's dense. and you believe in its existence. But projection, you can easily disprove it yourself. So the mind at this Sushupti level, and then at the Swapna level, and then at the Grad level, that is dreaming, deep sleep, dreaming, and waking, or what they call causal, subtle, and gross levels. That's the threefold mind you're talking about. It's the AUM of Om, and it's the three bodies and the three worlds. Take your pick of any of those or put them all together. That this is the Triputi that you've been blessed with or cursed with, depending on if you see it or not. Across the board, you see cosmic materials are non-existent and then are created from nothing. We don't have anywhere to go with this. We can't even prove that they came out of black holes yet, if that's what we're thinking. Where is energy and matter that is where is that source for that? See, where's the origin of it? Is it just coming out of nothing, or is it coming out of black holes, which are nothing in space? Or is the whole idea coming from a seed form? See, as in India, these are ever-present, subtle, and undetected by you, and you're looking outward for their causes. At their effects, but you're not looking inward for their cause. See? So, India is taking you deeper and deeper into these kingdoms of heaven within, and beginning to show you what's there that will clear up for you so many age-old doubts and will disprove a lot of this. That is, disprove it as an ultimate truth. As a relative truth, while you're here, it might be something you can entertain and look into. But as an ultimate truth, it's not going to satisfy you. Lower knowledge, won't satisfy you. That's the only higher knowledge will satisfy you. Lower knowledge will satisfy you for a little while. Higher knowledge for all time. Who said that? Swami Vivekananda. The fourth there is principle of thought projection. Atmic Sankalpa it's called. Across the board, principle of creation. Creator fashions all out of what? Out of dust? You were dust once, and you returned to dust? That's just the body you're talking about. You can't create a soul, India says. It's a create. In fact, there's only one soul. So if you're talking about many souls, that you're talking about the nonsense of babies, or the prattling of children. So you must be much more sensible, much more rational, and much more true to the philosophical calling. And Vedanta will give you that information called Dharma in no uncertain terms. And it stands behind it with the experience of hundreds of thousands of seers that have proved this to themselves by their direct spiritual experience. Very old and ancient, you see, as it were, rather than not just a few centuries of looking at it from the Western perspective in Europe and America. So, thought projection. Everything has been projected from the seeds in your mind, and they've become solidified out here. Holy Mother used to say that objects are just thought made concretized, she said. So, she's not pulling any punches there. They weren't created out of matter or something. There was something before matter. It was an idea, and that gave rise to the solid object later. But its origin was back in the mind, and the mind was back in the cosmic mind, and the cosmic mind is back in Om, the Word. And the Word is in Brahman. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So you're going to have to make these inner jumps, philosophically first, and then maybe you'll be able to prove rationally, practically, what's going on out here, without falling into the trap of suffering and delusion, or false truths, or half-truths that you're getting. Next, unmanifested prakriti projected by the great mind appears as manifest nature. But here, nature is incepted by the void, from the void informed by physical force. It's as close as I could understand, put it in words, you see. It's all incepted by nature, as if nature could do that by itself, since it's insentient, and it's brought together by some physical force, sort of like, let's wake Frankenstein up of the dead with electricity, you see, kind of thinking. But the idea in India has never been that anything was ever created out of nothing. Nothing doesn't exist. I found that exact quote in Vivekananda's writings yesterday. He said it right there. Nothing doesn't exist. I've been using that for years, thinking that I got it from somewhere else, but Swamiji actually said it. There's no such thing as nothing, not to the Indian seer. So what there is just what he called waves and hollows. He likes to use the term waves and hollows, like an ocean rising and falling back into a hollow, and a wave coming up in hollows. And this is like just at the ocean. This is going on all the time with matter and unmanifested matter. Sometimes it disappears and seems like a void, and other times it comes out and it seems full. And this is going on in constant cycles. See, but it's not transformation that's going on there that's real. See, it's all unoriginated, and that's why you can't find the truth to it yet, because you don't think in terms of non-duality. Non-origination is the highest truth, said Gaudapada. There's no higher truth than non-origination. Ajativada. And if you take the word apart, ajati, there's no birth, and it's the path of those who believe that there's no birth to anything, no jata. So no creation, no beginning, however you want to put that. That's our first mistake we stumble on. We think, oh, a baby was born. We don't think its body came out of nature as a seed. And the soul was there doing it. See, in other words, before death, you formed your body with the materials of unmanifested nature, and then you put them in the mother's womb and they came out, and there is your body, you see. You produced it yourself. And you can do that as many times as you want, hopefully not in ignorance, because you'll never know the truth of the matter. But you've got all of unmanifested nature at your beck and call, you see. So this is why you turned off your outer senses, because your outer senses became at the beck and call of manifested nature. See, attached to objects, didn't it? Isn't that what everyone's blindly going about doing, is pursuing objects as if they will satisfy, as if they will fulfill, as if they're real? So whether it's on the emotional level or the philosophical level, it's not going to wash. You're going to have to realize that all of unmanifested nature is at your beck and call, and this is what you've been using to produce your many lifetimes. And that God didn't have a finger in that. Brahman, see, didn't have a finger in that. That was your ego doing that. That was your individuated self doing that. It saw, it wanted to play, see, if you want to put it that way. So it saw that stuff and said, I think I'll take that and I'll make this. Just like an architect would think and then make a structure. But you know what Lord Buddha said about that? The ridgepole has been sundered. You see, I've seen the house that the architect of Maya makes, and I'm not going to build houses anymore. I will not build any more houses, not of wood, not of stone, not of wise conception, not of blood and bone. See, I will not build those houses anymore. So before that realization comes, you were building houses. Your ego was putting together structures, you see. And these structures were very fine at the level of the Mahat, you see. That level of the Mahat. Cosmic materials, thought projection, unmanifested Prakriti, all used by the great mind, Mahat. So when you got up into the great mind and became one with that, then you saw the marvelous projection called highest heaven. And that made an impression upon you, so you wanted to come down a few notches and play with it yourself and become a little creator, a little projector. See? And you thought you were so fine and good, and your ego was so happy about that, you see. But then you saw the true self, like Buddha did under the bo tree after sitting 40-some days or more. And he said, I won't build those houses anymore. I see my folly here. And I see the thousands and hundreds and thousands of people who have fallen into that folly, how they got trapped in that wise conception, so-called. Next, consciousness assumes forms. That's how Vedanta would say. Souls are created from matter. That's how this other side would say it. Souls are created from matter. That's if you believe in a soul. If you don't think there's a soul and a scientist, well, then it's kind of a moot point. But if you're into religion and you think that God breathed into some dust or something, you see, or your soul was actually created, then Vedanta considers that the prattling of babies, you see. That's superstition. The soul is never created. It's the witness of everything. And it has all of this at its beck and call. And it just needs to be very careful if it does come down into the realm of name and form, that it knows that it's under that auspice it's doing. It's using these mechanisms, the ego, the mahat, the ego, the mind, intelligence, thought. And then from thought, it begins to get dicey, you see. After the fourfold mind, then you've got the 5 pranas, and you've got the 5 senses, and you've got the 5 elements, and the 5 active senses. In that realm is where the karma gets accrued, and where you get attached to things that you've projected. Pretty soon you're even going to say, it's my creation, but creation's not real. You can't create something out of nothing. You project it out of the mind. So you're beginning to use words in the wrong way. And these are causing misunderstandings to you and your children and your society and your world after a while. You haven't used words carefully. You haven't used the philosophy. You probably transgressed the original philosophy that your forefathers wanted to teach you. So, consciousness assumes form, but souls are created from matter. Oops. There's your option. So here, consciousness is aware and sports by associating with forms. But here, consciousness is forgotten and the body is seen as reality. See the difference? And I think I'll take a body and sport a little bit. It's called Leela. I'm going to play a little while and then I'll give it up. But no, I think actually I'm going to create the body and then I'm going to get into it and it's real and I'm going to create many more. And I'm going to fall into the misconception that all the lives I lived were real. And that matter is real. The many times that the soul lives, the more it considers the world to be real. Sri Ramakrishna said that. Nature rises and falls timelessly from unmanifested prakriti, is how Vedanta would say. Waves and hollows, right? Waves and hollows, always rising and falling. You have to get back away from it to see that. If you're part of the ocean, you're rising and falling with it. Sometimes you're falling into a hollow, that's called depression. Sometimes you're rising, that's called elation. One's called sorrow, one's called happiness. One's called pleasure, one's called pain, you see. Or pain and pleasure. But you never have gotten back into the true consciousness that knows it's all a projection and doesn't need to suffer pain, doesn't need to be depressed. And so you never saw that, you see. And it doesn't need to be attached to pleasure because the soul is complete. That one soul that you are is complete. Perfect and pure and complete at all times. It's the witness of all this. Rising and falling. You must have that sight that's called Kaivalya. At that point, then you'll sunder the ridgepole of the house, bring it crashing down. Or at that point, according to Patanjali, you will divorce yourself from nature. You don't want to be involved in unmanifested and manifested nature anymore. This cycle of waves and hollows. And this is what a realized soul is. Which is why you studied Ishvara, which is why you studied avatars, which is why you looked at Brahman and its relationship with Atman, and all those principles of Sanatana Dharma. This is why you looked into that for years, so that you had that grounding and understanding. So then you found out through your own experience that you're on a wheel, like a hamster, and going nowhere faster. You see. You're running harder, but you're going nowhere faster, and until you stop. And that's called Kaivalya yoga. You get a divorce from nature. Otherwise, nature evolves over spans of time considered to be actual. So time is now in the picture, and it's dragging itself along. Or maybe it's speeding by to your death. Either way, you're considered it to be real. Whether it drags or whether it speeds, in the end you're dissatisfied with it. So you need to realize the eternal moment. You see, Kalastri Kala Kalopi Dustaha is what I chanted just at the beginning of the class. It's the witness of the three phases of time. That's you. You're the witness of Kalo de Kalopi Dristaha. You're the Dristaha, the seer of the three phases of time. So if they're going constantly past, present, and future, if you're drug along with them, then you never know yourself to be Dristaha. Drista. The seer, really it means. The last two here, and then we'll take our break. Souls consisting of consciousness rise and fall in and out of Brahman. That's very nicely put. These souls actually are sparks off the fire, qualified non-dualistic way of saying. They're actually full of Brahman when they rise and take a form. And they rise in and out of Brahman, and they know they do. So it's no problem for them to take on forms and give up forms. On the other hand, souls give themselves to the illusion of birth and death. That's a problem. And that doesn't apply just to the scientist or the religious. It's across the board. It doesn't matter whether you believe in science as the ultimate truth or whether you believe in religion. It's the same problem for you. You give yourself to the illusion of birth and death. Both of those kinds of souls do. You might not believe in God, but you have to believe in birth and death. You see. It's just that you don't have very much farsightedness to look ahead to your own death. What to speak of enough insight to transcend your own death. What to speak of thinking that I never was born, so I can never die. You see, the levels of it are very profound. You either consider birth and death to be real, and you suffer them, maybe even just once, maybe many times. That's one option. Or you look ahead to your death and say, I'm going to be prepared for it. Good luck with that one. It'll come out of nowhere. Or you start thinking maybe death's illusion. Like the seers have told me, I should try and transcend it. I'll live forever. See? Of course, physically that's not going to work. You'll have to take little breaks from the body. I'll never see you again. Not in eternity. You'll always see each other again in eternity. We just won't see each other in Maya every so often. When one dies and you'll see another one takes birth and takes a body. And you separate from people. That's the pain of it, you see. But it's not happening in eternity. It's happening just in Maya. You can never, maybe I'll read it, I don't think there's enough time to do it, but I'll read what Vivekananda says about this oneness that we all experience. Very beautiful. But on this side, souls give themselves to the illusion of birth and death. Now this last one, in Vedanta, souls assume form as long as the desire to experience individuality persists. There's no judgment, there's no guilt, there's no shame here in Vedanta. It's just pretty much putting it the way it is. We will experience form so long as we want to experience what individuality is like. As soon as we get over ourselves, get over our egos, then we won't take on the body anymore, that's all. And we'll just be this witness of consciousness, which is pure bliss, pure existence, pure knowledge, indescribable. It's Brahman, it's oneness, it's Advaita, it's Samadhi, it's Satori, it's Nirvana. However you want to say it in different traditions. India has lots of words for it. On the other side, though, the embodied soul lives one lifetime, then passes into heaven or hell. That's, of course, speaking fundamentally, religiously. For the scientists, it's just one lifetime and that's it. That is, birth and death he has to believe in. A friend of mine told me recently, I was talking to one of my coworkers and asked her, what happens to you after death? And she says, my body rots in the ground. So that was her conclusion. So one lifetime and that's it. Actually, that perspective is both in fundamentalist religion, because they don't believe or talk much about reincarnation like we do in Buddhism and Hinduism. And it's also with the materialists. They can't find any way out of that end, death, you see. And that's based upon these other ideas that they have formulated in their minds that have been foisted upon them, but haven't been given this thrilling, eternally living, wonderful, and revealing philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, the oneness of all existence. Even when you pass out of the one into apparent two-ness, how you treat it. See, like those paths of Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, and Advaita that we looked at 2 weeks ago. So here, we took a whole first half to look at these two perspectives that hold many, many secrets to them, and also many, many revelations, hopefully that will set us right and awaken us again to the possibilities and potentials, what to speak of the ultimate nature of pure conscious awareness. So we will break here. In the second half of our third class on India Sanatana Dharma, we've taken another very deep teaching and shown the unique way in which Vedanta would present to us the spiritual art, the idea of soul and consciousness and so forth. And I said I was going to read a little something after we finish this chart that Swami Vivekananda wrote in a letter once. It's very beautiful, that has this idea of consciousness infused in its very depths. He says, each soul is like a star, and all stars are set in that infinite azure, that eternal sky, the Lord. There is the root, the reality, the real individuality of each and all. Religion began with a search after some of these stars that had passed beyond our horizon and ended up finding them all in God and ourselves in the same place. The whole secret is that a man gives up the old garment he is wearing and is standing where he was through all eternity. That is, he drops his form and the soul is still right there. Will he manifest another such garment in this or any other world? I sincerely pray that he may not, until he does so in full consciousness. I pray that none will be dragged anywhither by the unseen power of his own past actions. I pray that all will be free, that is to say, may know that they are free. And if they are to dream again, let us pray that their dreams be all of peace and bliss. This earth moves, causing the illusion of the movement of the sun. But the sun does not move. Just so, nature, Maya, Prakriti, is moving, changing, unfolding veil after veil of this grand book called life, while the witnessing soul drinks in knowledge, unmoved, unchanged. All souls that have ever been, are, shall be, are all in the present tense and, to use a material simile, are standing at one geometrical point because the idea of space does not occur in the soul. Therefore, all that were ours, are ours, and will be ours, are always with us, were always with us, and will always be with us. We are them, they are in us. I had a premonition of your giving up the old body, but it is not my custom to write to anyone when a wave of disharmonious Maya strikes them. But I can tell you this, there are great turning points in life, and we must be unmoved. The surface of the sea rises and sinks alternatively, but to the observant soul, the child of light, each sinking reveals more and more of the depth of the beds of pearls and coral at the bottom. Coming and going is all pure delusion. The soul never comes nor goes. Where is the place to which it shall go when all of space is in the soul? When shall be the time of entering or departing when all of time is in the soul? We only know then that nothing is lost or can be found. For us is only submission, calm and perfect. So I probably couldn't select any better phrases, actually writings in some of his letters. This would be a typical letter you might get from Swami Vivekananda. It's not like, hi, how are you, how's the weather, and I'm vacationing, or something. But this is the kind of letter you would get from him every time. And so many of these things are mentioned. You could say he's a Vedantist to the very core, a fully realized Vedantist, and this is not just his belief system, this is his faith, and this is how he lives. So, a very wonderful way of saying that. You could also sing it, if you want, these very things. Better. Om Mano Bhujahamkara Chitani Naham Nacha Shrutra Jiyuve Nacha Grana netre Lachya vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu Chidananda rupa Shivoham Shivoham Chidananda rupa Shivoham Shivoham Om. I am neither mind, intelligence, ego, or chitta. Chitta is thoughts. Neither ears nor tongue, nor the senses of smell or sight. Nor am I ether, earth, fire, water, or air. I am pure consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. And of course, only the first verse of the Nirvana Shatkam, the 7 verses on Nirvana, which is one of those great ideals that you would study in India's Sanatana Dharma. Nirvana, Samadhi, relating in no uncertain terms this presence of the Lord in everything, as he was saying in this reading we just took up. And therefore, running counter to this kind of thinking. See, this kind of thinking is true, and as far as it goes on the level that it proposes itself, where it exists, the physical only. But just like so many things that we don't see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, there are inside of the physical, there is energy. And inside of energy, there is thought. And inside of thought, there's intelligence. And, inside of intelligence, there's the soul. You see, there's Brahman. There's Atman. And so this is actually a very nice way. We're going to paint these. Some of the children here are going to paint these. But basically, this is a very nice illustration, and I do have a chart on it that you've seen, called the 5 akashas, or 5 types of space. So, I mean, you can talk about it philosophically, but you could also talk about it in terms of space. You're saying, where is the time which the soul will come and go when all of time is in the soul? And where's the space into which it will go and come from when all the space is in the soul? So they're not actually moving at all. All coming and going is mere nonsense, he says, because he's sat stationary like Buddha did under the bo tree and Christ did in the wilderness, long enough to see himself, to take everything back, withdraw everything that was projected by him and him alone, not by God, not by devil. And he's taken it all back to the ultimate source, you see, and there he found himself. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart. And inside the heart is called Atman. You see, that's where the Atman has its citadel. I'm quoting him verbatim. That's where the Atman has its citadel. It's right there in the shrine of the heart, we say. I mean, it's very easy to get confused. If you want to put it in another way that's very beautiful, you could sing it this way. No Kamalakanta sings this beautiful devotional song to Mother Kali. Sometimes I just don't know who you are. I don't know consciousness. I don't know my own consciousness. I don't know ultimate consciousness. Sometimes it looks like I think I'm Purusha, the soul. Sometimes Prakriti. It looks like I'm nature. So he's being very candid about his philosophical conundrum. Zay says, but I can say this, I'm amazed to see how Shiva has become mad with ecstasy by meditating upon you, Mother Kali, meditating upon thy splendor, as he says. So the purveyor and the foister, whose sleight of hand, the prestidigitation from the five-fingered hand of Mother Kali, you see, and all of this comes forth out of consciousness. So there's not only a source and an energy, a Shakti and so forth, there's a Shaktiman, there's a wielder of this power. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, that on this side is full of consciousness. See? Chid Akasha, this is the consciousness that's the innermost of all of the manifested forms. And then on this side, only this outer is all we're seeing. See? This is all we have to look at is this outer doll. And we play with that doll and suffer, see, because birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death are all there, painted on that doll. Its names, its forms, its transformations, when really there never was any transformation to begin with. And so we suffer in playing with nature. And as we play with nature, we forget that there's an unmanifested side to it. That's what science doesn't know. What's in the void, you see? Nothing. That's the outer void. See? But in the inner void, when you go into deep sleep tonight, or when you go into samadhi as a soul, or when you pass from the body at death and take on a formless form, then you see that there's unmanifested, there's seeds for all of this. And that would be a way of penultimate realization for you, to see the seeds. Because then you have a choice whether to water them or not. And most souls have lost that privilege of being able to make that choice. That's called ignorance. Not ignorance of facts and figures, ignorance of your true nature, of vidya. It's the first of 5 great hells, and it causes the other 4, which are lower. The first hell that causes all their hells is avidya, that is ignorance of your true nature. So whether you put it in terms of philosophy, or whether you sing it as a stotram, or whether you put it in a devotional song, it pretty much translates all the same. Now, I only show this chart again here to remind you, because I think we might have seen this once here in Hawaii already, but I wanted to read a couple quotes off of it. For instance, here, consciousness cannot be formulated. It neither originates nor speciates from matter. It is both the singular self-existent entity and the primal womb of all matter and all worlds. So you don't get consciousness from matter. Matter comes from consciousness. It's the whole thing Maya has turned it, you have to turn it on its ear. It has turned everything on its ear, you have to turn it back to find you as the source to all of this. In the meantime, you are missing consciousness. You are consciousness. You are missing, you see, and your ego's in its place. My teacher used to say that, here in Christianity in the West and so forth, they pray to God and worship God and so forth and say God exists, but that's not God they're praying to. That's their own ego. God doesn't have a form. You can't pray to God. You have to realize God. You can pray to forms of God, but those are ultimately unreal. They will disappear when you go into samadhi, or when you go into satori, or when you go into nirvana, or when you have the highest realization, I and my Father are one. Then where's the other form? In oneness, where's the form? Where's the cause for the form? There is no other. I mean, you can sing that in many ways too, if you wanted to take the time to do so, and oftentimes we like to do that. For instance, here we'd sing Samasteshu vastush Vanushu tom ekam Samastani vastuni anasprishanti Vivat sadashudam achasvarupam Sanichopalabdis swarupohamatma. In just one of these 13 verses, Astamalaka, this great knower of Brahman, says, there is only this one, existing in all beings, and all beings existing in it. It filters down and touches all hearts and minds, yet nothing can touch it. It is like the sky, pure and serene, subtle and impossible to taint. That one am I am that one, there can be none other. That's the Kevala Asti view we were looking at several weeks ago. I am alone, or I alone am, however you want to put that. So, talking about consciousness as singular, indivisible, all-pervasive, we look for words in English to try and communicate this to ourselves, because if we can find words, then we can entertain these very high philosophical thoughts. Otherwise, the options we have to go to, even amongst the intellectuals, are not very engaging for us. And they're not making sense, whether they be conventionally religious ones or even science, quantum physics and so forth. Each have something to offer in their own realm, but nothing is offered like this. And what I've just been singing about, and what we're learning from India and from Sanatana Dharma. So that's a very beautiful quote there, you see. It doesn't speciate from matter, not like species, you see. All species come from it. And it is simultaneously the single self-existent entity and the womb of all matter. Simultaneously it's that. And it's missing. See? Either you're looking for it out of dust, or you're looking for it in a void. See? It's missing in all other locations where intellectuals or devotees, religionists occupy. See? In Vedanta, that's an atmosphere that gives you all the answers right away at once. All you need to do is contemplate them and return to your original state. See, wake up from that drunken stupor of materialism. Other quote here, science and religion need not debate over whether life comes from a Big Bang or a Heavenly Father. The problem here is narrowness of outlook. Both views can and do coexist. It is only that evolution of embodied species, from single-celled microorganism to tadpole to four-legged creature to two-legged human, takes place on the physical plane alone. Formless awareness emanates through subtler levels of space that lie within consciousness, from God's word to God's mind, to the realms of the gods, to the life heavens of the celestial beings and the ancestors. The kingdom of heaven lies within. My Father's mansion has many chambers. So, pretty much summating in this quote what we just studied here, you see. And if you wanted to look at it in terms of this march of the hominidae for 15 million years, see, eukaryotes to chordates, to tetrapods, mammals, primates, and all coming from living inside of the realm of solar, sun-baked, sun-granted, water-based, earth-based life. over many, many millions of years, so that mankind only has a small little portion of existence inside of this long series of evolution they're proposing to us. So it makes it look very much like we're just a visitor for just a moment to this whole world and what's going on here. That's not actually a bad view, because Christ said birds have nests, foxes have holes, but we have no place to lay our head here. See? Beings that are coming out of prana and going back into prana, plants, insects, they have a place here, you see. But mankind is not that. Mankind has a soul in it. See? It's not that plants and animals don't have the Atman in it, they do. But it's not realizable in that form. It gets realized in this form, in the form of a human. Human being has that capacity to realize God dwelling inside itself. Self-realization, enlightenment, nirvana, satori, all of those are open to the human being. So they're going to want to realize that spiritual potential in this lifetime. May we arise and awaken this lifetime, not leave it to chance, to cycles of time which may drag the soul from birth to death and death to birth, as Vivekananda puts it. So all the rest of this is we've looked at before. If you went to another level where there are conceptual rays, because you're talking about how consciousness is a projector. So at the level of the angels, celestials, ancestors he's talking about here, and then also the gods and goddesses, or the devis and devas, the deities that are looking on. These are two other levels of consciousness inside of us, you see. One's the next realm is the realm of the ancestors, the next little doll, and the doll inside of that is going to be the realm of the deities, gods and goddesses. And deity yoga is becoming pretty big in the West. I'd say it's much better, of course, than the Hatha Yoga Pranayama kind of culture that's developing. If you start to meditate on deities, then you're getting much closer and much deeper to the source. Because these deities are called shining ones. They shine with the light of consciousness. And you're going to locate them within you, all within you, not outside, but within you, so that the trajectory is definitely inward ascension type of trajectory, not an outward, elevation. You see, like in terms of higher up in space, but it's deeper in inner space, and that's the orientation of Sanatana Dharma. Quote there: "People say this is the age of the Atman. I do not agree. It is the age of the Atman." Did I say that right? People say this is the age of the atom. I do not agree, my teacher said. It is the age of the Atman. So we must realize, awaken to this full potential in us spiritually, and we'll need to go beyond ourselves as physical bodies. Om mano bujaham kara chittani naham. I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, I'm not air, earth, fire, water, ether. These are the teachings in which Advaita Vedanta will give you, so that you can, if you need it, have permission to go beyond the physical and go beyond even the astral and beyond the subtle and the causal to this ultimate goal. There you see the meditator sitting right there in the center. See? Now here, before we leave this chart, there you see the 5 little Russian dolls here. Outside is the Bhutakasha, inside, next doll is the Pranakasha. That's the realm of energy. And by the way, this isn't kinetic, electric, or physical energy we're talking about alone. It's psychic energy and prana, it's called. We don't have a word for it. Man does not live by bread alone. It's about the closest thing in our tradition, Christian tradition, that we have to think about that. There's there's an energy that comes from food that gets sublimated, that will then awaken your spirituality, give you a certain power or force, Shakti power, to awaken to higher levels of consciousness. And when you awaken it, then you can live in the mind, as I was talking about in the first half, the Chittakasha. You can begin to live in this inner realm called mind intelligence. See? And intelligence gets fully refined here at the Jnanakasha. That would be this 4th little doll inside, you see. inside of each one. So all being held inside the two hands of Mahamaya, the great mother, you see, is holding these akashas. Akasha is a word we have in Sanskrit that we don't have an equivalent for in English, because we don't think in terms of inner worlds. In fact, when we think heaven, we look up, you see. It's really worse than science. Science is a better friend of Vedanta than fundamentalist religion is, because fundamentalist religion is just pretty much a set of misnomers and misfiances now. They've concentrated on the wrong teachings. They've made literal the wrong teachings of Jesus, instead of bringing out these powerful ones and explaining them in the light of Vedanta. The beautiful book I would recommend to everyone, Sermon on the Mount According to Vedanta, put out by one of our great Swamis, Swami Prabhavananda here in the West when he was alive. So you'll find these books. There's also another one called Christ and the Oriental Ideal by Swami Paramananda. Beautiful work on showing. And there's one by Swami Satprakashananda, Christianity and Hinduism. And you'll find Buddhist empathy. Buddhist and Hindu empathy is another good one. So there's books been put out by thinkers that have wanted to take the best of all these religions, because this kind of thinking, happens to all religions. But science is now its own religion with its own kind of ignorance, and it's making some of the it's completely denying religion for one thing, and then it's not looking beyond towards how to say it, towards the highest philosophy, towards Advaita Vedanta, towards the truth. There is a truth that transcends all of this. So anyway, this is some of the advantages of moving inside yourself to these deeper levels of consciousness. In the Gyanakashas, you'll find your teachers, you'll find the rishis, you'll find the seers, the saints, the sages, and the realized souls are in the Gyanakasha. This is where they move when they drop their bodies, if they want to come back. If they don't want to come back, they will merge into Chittakasha. I and my Father are one style. Christ could have very easily left the body when he had that experience, but he came back to tell them, I am the light of the worlds. All the worlds are in me. I light up the worlds. The worlds don't light me up. In fact, they depress me quite often. I look at them and what people are doing with them, you see. So I am the light of the worlds. You wanted to come back and let everyone know, just like Lord Buddha coming out of Nirvana, wanted to come back and tell everyone. At first he couldn't speak for days. It was just completely what he had seen had blown his mind, see, had blasted his mind, had dissolved his mind. That's why he said, the ridgepole has been cut asunder, the rafters have come falling down, the walls are tumbling. I've seen the architect of Maya. I'm not going to build any more houses, see. So when you have that kind of deep, deep look at the nature of consciousness, we were saying at the break that our Zen Buddhist teaching there is very beautiful, that if you want to know the nature of consciousness, then you must study consciousness as closely as an Eskimo would study snow conditions. See, because he has to know winds and consistency of snow, how deep it's getting, if it's freezing. There's a dozen things to know about snow in order to catch seals and feed himself in a place where, if he wanted to eat, he'd have to eat iceberg lettuce or something, you see. He's got to find food, so he has to study snow conditions very carefully. And that same way, you've got to study your own consciousness. Take it out and look at it, just like the Sanatana Dharma is telling you. And you'll find out that in terms of space, you can look at it in terms of time and timelessness, look at it in terms of Dharma and sadhana and teachings. You can look at it in terms of space, kingdoms of heaven within you. There's so many ways to look at it. Just do it. Just look at it in as many different ways as you can. And remember actually that Gaudapada wants you to do that in Advaita Vedanta, in his Karika. He wants you to look at the A, U, and M of Om and the Turiya, and so that you know that your waking state gets illumined, your dreaming state gets illumined, you become masterful in your deep sleep state, and then you transcend all three to Turiya. Turiya means the fourth. So he wants to get you to a high state of consciousness where you can look back on the three matras of Om, or on these three bodies, on these three worlds, and the Trinity who's operating them from a witness standpoint that is evinced in Advaita Vedanta and has been sung about in these songs, you see. So whatever illustrations you have to do, you look at the symbology of this. Just don't paint it and put it on a shelf. You see, oh, isn't it pretty? It's so unique. There's a symbology, you see, that's very profound for your spiritual life. And you need to think about those things. And that thinking will happen at the Chittakasha and the Gyanakasha. The energy for it will happen at the Pranakasha, and all the symbols of it are here. It's called Archa in Vedanta. There are 4 ways of looking at God, and the first is through the symbol. Since you're at the realm of the symbol, you know what I mean by symbol? Objects. Objects are symbols for Brahman. They're proofs that Brahman exists. That's how they look at it. So you're going to have to take every object, and this is also a tantric way of, and worship it. See it as what it is. Now, science has done that to a certain point. It's looked at the objects now, archa, symbols. This is the realm of objects, and it's looking at them specifically, and it's finding that they're empty, that they're full of vibrating particles that are somehow congealed into objects. So the congealing power is what they want to look at next. That's the snow condition, you see. The next level of the scientific Eskimo snow condition is to look at the congealing power of objects. What congealed them? And if nature can't do it by itself, you're going to have to look into formless nature and its seeds. And then you're going to have to put consciousness with unmanifested nature, because the seeds are planted in the ground, you see, of consciousness. They exist in the ground of consciousness like hundreds and thousands of seeds exist in the soil of a forest, buried, ready to come forth, you see, or not, depending on if they're watered. So you're going to not only, and I'll get to that next week in this class called Connections, not only do you have to study that, you have to take account of what exists in you and then make the connections with them. Consciousness to, or if you're coming from the opposite direction, objects to what congealed them, the congealing power itself, and the seeds for it, which is what we were talking about when we read this. Right? I mean, he has many different ways of saying it too, and very beautiful ways. Many of which would take probably too much time to read. But he says basically about Vedanta, this Vedanta should be preached in Europe and America. Modern science has undermined the basis of religions like Christianity. Modern science is undermining the basis of religion like Christianity. Over and above that, luxury is about to kill the religious instinct itself. Comfort and truth can't go together. Europe and America are looking towards India with expectant eyes. This is the time for philanthropy. This is the time to occupy the hostile strongholds. But we would do nothing ourselves and scoff at others who would try to do something. This is the bane that has brought about our downfall as a nation. He's talking about India. That is, they had all this truth. They had everything they needed. They had realized souls. And what happened to it? See, over time, how it fell and so forth. In the meantime, they were keeping all this religion inside the shores of India and were not letting it out to any other country. Anyone who took this precious Sanatana Dharma out of India lost their caste and their status. And that was what Vivekananda was up against when he jumped the ocean, like Hanuman, in 1893 and brought the Vedanta here. All the Brahmin priests criticized him. And they said, "You lost your caste." And he said, "But I don't have a caste. I'm a sannyasin. I'm not part of the caste system. I'm a free soul, and I'm going to spread this broadcast." So this is, he said, people criticize me in the papers and so forth. I make an offering of those papers to the fire god. She's not listening to them, you see. Want of energy and lack of sympathy are at the root of all misery. And you must therefore give these two up. All right? Want of energy, so tamas and so forth, or rajas even is want of energy because your energy is being spent in the wrong direction. Wasted, you see, spinning your wheels. And lack of sympathy. So you have to be, like he had sympathy towards us. He brought this teaching to us in 1893 despite everyone against it. He had the Brahmin priests against him in India, and he had the Christian clergy here against him, see, for the most part. A few Christian clergy woke up and supported him and said, "This is, Jesus has come again, as it were. This is a great truth." For Vivekananda to ask for credentials to go to the Parliament of Religions is like the sun asking for permission to shine. See, as one Christian priest said to him. See, so this is the light of this, the light of Asia. Give up and take is the law. Give and take is the law. And if India wants to raise herself once more, it is absolutely necessary that she brings out her treasures and throws them broadcast among the nations of the earth, and in return be ready to receive what others have to give back to her. Expansion is life, contraction is death, love is life, hatred is death. So he had the energy, we know that, and he didn't have want of sympathy. He had all the empathy for us, and in his brief 39 years spent himself completely on spreading this Vedanta across the world. So it was to undermine, since science was undermining religion, then he wanted to undermine those tenets in science which were not tenable and not acceptable. And he wanted to bring out of science, as he said here, what was beneficial. But if you study an object and you don't see it as a symbol of Brahman, watch out, because it's got a lot of particles in it. It's got a lot of places to take you in Maya. See? But if you saw it as a symbol for Brahman, everything is a symbol for Brahman, then you're halfway towards knowing all is Brahman. Brahman exists everywhere and in everything. Atman is in everyone and everything, equally, in quality and in quantity. See? So those are Vedantic watchwords for anyone sadhana. So all I'm saying from that, it wasn't a sidetrack, but it was a facet, is that India first looks at all of this as facets of Brahman. Everything is a facet of Brahman. That's the best way to start off. Later on, when you see that it's empty, you can say, all right, I renounce it. It's not what I thought it was. I found it to be unfulfilling. And I saw it could be stolen and it could decay. And it wasn't satisfying me in the end. So, yeah, I'll give it up now, you see. So you start out on those premises which are good for your spiritual practice. All right, so we've gone through that. You see, though, up here past the meditator is this Om, the word. Okay. And the word is very, very important to India. Before we get to those teachings, though, let's flip, please, and see what's behind door number 3 and 4. Now, I wanted to flash a chart at you. That's what I do. And show you the old warhorse called Chittabhasa. When we talk about Vivarta, it's very obvious now that India would look upon everything as a projection. Also as a false superimposition over Brahman, which is nameless and formless, which is timeless and deathless, which has no origin and which has no transformation in it. Okay, these are the pillars, right? Keep these in mind as you take up any new level of teaching. It's like holding on to the truth while you see Maya go floating by. Also holding on to the truth while you see the Dharmic teachings go by. You see, the Dharmic teachings will get rid of Maya in your mind, but they're not going to, their wisdom, they're not going to show you the truth. They're going to show you wisdom. Through that wisdom, you're going to have to take it yourself and open up the door to truth. Knock and it shall be opened, ask and it shall be answered. So that's what the Dharma facilitates for you. One of the Dharmic teachings then is Chittabhasa, that is the reflection of Brahman in the cosmos. So now we're looking at a view in Vedanta that shows that everything is a container, right, for Brahman. And quickly, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time for it, here's pure conscious awareness, and it's filtering down like rain, you see, from on high. And it hits the Mahashakti, that is she who will take everything and turn things into forms and invest them with intelligence and make sure the Atman stays intact in them and so forth. This is Divine Mother of the Universe, we call her. And emanates right down, right into the Atman, and there's unmanifested Prakriti. The sentient side of things and then the unsentient side of things. Right away we have a split into two from the original oneness. And when we see the insentient side of oneness, we see unmanifested Prakriti also then splits into two. It has an unmanifested side and it has a manifested side. From the unmanifested side will be the seeds and stored forever, eternally, right? And then from that, manifested Prakriti can begin to develop from seeds, and that will be what will happen. You'll see that down here. Now, if the whole thing filters down to cosmic intelligence, Buddhi, Mahat, you could call it by different names, Aranyagarbha, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, this powerful intelligence is there, which is the first compound out of consciousness. And through that intelligence, everything will get formulated. And that's for the seer, of course, to witness. So, in order to witness that, it's going to have to see that it is reflected consciousness is happening at that point. That there has been an apparent move away from pure conscious awareness to the realms of name and form in their so-called inception. There's going to be an inkling of form now being suggested through intelligence. It's what it will eventually show up as objects, but that's later. It's called really the 4 stages of the word. This is the Pashanti stage. Para is up here, there's no form, but when form gets suggested, you'll see an intelligence is at the root of that. So here's Brahmagyan, this intelligence of Brahman, appearing as various eternal principles. So the filtering down is happening more, you see. And what you'll see pretty much is prana and akasha coming up. There's psychic prana and energy. That is, this intelligence has to be moved by something. Otherwise it has a tendency just to stay pure and perfect on its own. It loves that. You see, it's sort of like the Gyanakasha. You see, it's a realm of its own. But there has to be something that will move it out. Just like lava will be moved out of a volcano by explosion. And so, Akasha would be our word again for these different kinds of space, right? Not just physical space, that's the outer, but all of those little Russian dolls inside are 4 other kinds of space that are existing inside of the physical Akasha. That is, inside means in the kingdoms of heaven within. As you move inward, you'll find prana next, and it's one of the Akashas, and then you'll move on inward towards thought, intelligence is one of the Akashas. And finally you'll get to Chitakasha, right? So you could put this right here and say, oh, I see, now we're just getting that re-explained to us. in terms of how Brahman reflects itself in the cosmos. See, it's reflected consciousness. Sometimes I use the example of Paul seeing Christ on the road to Damascus and nobody else could see him. So what was that? Was that really Christ appearing to Paul? No, it was a Chittabhasa. It was a reflection of Christ suggesting himself on the intelligence of Paul, who was open to have a vision at that moment. See? So that's Chittabhasa. It's not the actual Christ that came there. It was a projection from the Christ consciousness to show a form of Christ in front of Paul, because no one else could see him except Paul. See? Burning bush, same thing. I had a Jewish man walk up to me the other day at New Thought Church there and say, yeah, well, I've always thought of the burning bush as just that. You see, he doesn't really actually see a burning bush. It wasn't God there. It was just what we would call Chittabhasa, you see, in Vedanta. It's a reflection of consciousness showing itself. And it's showing itself to you because your third eye has opened and you're open to it at that point, but nobody else standing around says, I don't see no burning bush, see. I don't see Jesus, see. So you have to have these special senses, love eyes, love ears, Sri Ramakrishna called them, in order to see God. Otherwise, as John said, nobody has seen God with these eyes. So he means these physical eyes. See. You have to have special senses to see that. And probably you won't be seeing it, you'll be feeling it very deeply. Or seeing it with an inner eye. So just some correlated teachings. But you can see there, out of this process, subtle energy, the subtle worlds, and higher gradated beings come into being. So there's got to be a moving energy like Shakti. There has to be the first worlds, or causal worlds, or subtle worlds, and there has to be, then these higher graded beings can people these worlds. So this is how consciousness is filtering down, or out, we should say, from this inner core, this inner light of Brahman. Then human ego-mind complex, that's more on the level of collective and individual mind. This is more on the level of cosmic mind. This is more on the level of collective and individual mind. So you've got the whole shooting match of billions of souls now, see, involved. And they're going to have a human ego-mind complex to occupy. See? Horse's body, cow's body, that won't do it for them. They like human form. See? I'm referring to one of the stories in the Upanishads where God gave human beings a cow body, and soul visited and said, that's not good enough. Gave him a horse body. Finally said, gave him a human body, said, this is great. This is well done. See? So that human body is going to be desirable for the soul to occupy. It can get into a lot of mischief in the human body, is how Sri Ramakrishna calls it. There it can do all sorts of mischief. That's, called antakarna, the inner organ, fourfold mind, human ego complex, we're calling it. Thought, concept, visions, imaginations, projections, inventions, desires, all are a part of that fourfold mind, and that's where the nonsense or the rascaliness really does begin. So many different souls can do so many different things with that fourfold mind. And we know what the rishis do with it, and they dissolve it as often as they can. And we know that the beings that fall into bondage, what they've done with it, and how they suffer, and how they cause others to suffer. So it's dicey right about here. See, this Chittabhasa should just be realized as a reflection, but now people are taking it to be real. They're not taking Brahman to be real, they're taking its reflection to be real. And this is why teachings like Vivarta, Adhyasa, and Chittabhasa are very important. They're negative teachings in Vedanta. And the negative teachings have the most healing effect on bound souls. They're not going to make any never mind to realize souls. I know that. But to bound souls, these are going to slap them in the face. So you say, I may be here in a predicament I'm not aware of. Guess what? I think there might be something called Maya. See? There might be false superimposition going on. There might be a wool being pulled over my eyes, you see. And all of a sudden they'll awaken, you see. So this is usually by ignoble whips of pain, this happens. The noble strokes of wisdom, the souls already have those, you see, so they're not worried about this kind of thing. But they're worried for you. See. They want to lift you up and out of it. This imagination, this projection, this invention based in desire that you're going through, they want to waken you up. But this is getting thicker and thicker now. The Maya is getting thicker. The atmosphere is getting thicker, not thinner. So out of that will come then time and space. We talk about that, people can just say time and space and walk away not understanding it, but India pretty much puts it in this case: 5 subtle elements, 5 gross elements, the physical universe, and karma is pretty much how you would flesh out time and space. You can't just put your finger on them somewhere. So time, especially time, is very, very invisible, and not most people aren't even aware of the passage of time, or forget about it when they do become aware of it. Space too, they also take that for granted. In fact, so much so that pretty soon they think there's only one space, and there's no spaces other than that. And that's called ignorance, thinking the world to be real, and all other things unreal. So out of that human embodiment, you see, is where it gets densest. The body, the 5 senses of knowledge, and the 5 senses of action. I mean, we went right by it, but we don't know that there are tanmatras. That is, these 5 subtle elements here. That there are air, earth, fire, water, and ether occur to us in the dream, too. And then they occur to us in waking state down here, right? So there are 5 subtle elements inside of you, out of which the gross elements came. If you just made that connection, then you could start to believe in consciousness on the left-hand side of this chart. It's all about connections right now for us. Vyahritis. It's all about connections. We have to make these connections, and one of them is going to be the subtle elements inside of us, out of which these 5 elements came, and another is going to be the subtle prana inside of us, out of which this prana out here came from. So prana and tanmatras missing in our ideology, in our thinking, in both our scientific and our religious thinking, missing. There in full form in India. And probably missing back at the time of the 12 apostles of Jesus, because he was telling them, man does not live by bread alone. You're living along a river and water with fish and huts and wives, but you don't know anything about the kingdoms of heaven within you. You cannot be satisfied with this life. You need an inner life. You need a spiritual life. And that will lead you to the realization of eternal life. See, so even 2,000 years ago, it's time being as undetectable as it is for most people. 2,000 years, not very long ago in India's estimation of time, but they weren't aware of prana either. And in fact, if Christ really did provide miracles, producing fish and wine, he did it through prana, through mastery of prana. I'm not a miracle monger, and I don't think those things are very important, but if those things are real and actual, and he was able to do it, he did it through mastery of prana. That's all. He knew he connected his mind to his energy, and he could produce things if he wanted to. So India knows about that, and is not very fond of miracles. It tends to lead towards bondage, to get involved with miracles. That would be, conceptualization and visions, imagination and projections. Not real. You're missing the whole point, see, when you stay at that level. So, the quote, the embodied being is none other than an emanation of jnana wisdom of Brahman. So this being here is none other than this consciousness. See, the intelligence of Brahman. You really are not the body-mind mechanism at all. You are the manifestation of Brahman through intelligence. The hosts of myriad worlds and objects appearing within endless cycles of time, it's all this, duly shine as the objective vision and ideation of its inherent consciousness. See, all this ideation is coming from consciousness. Thus, it is the one all-pervading Atman which assumes the name Jiva, embodied being, materializing with the intelligent force of its own innate awareness. So, Lord Vashishta's teaching out of Yoga Vashishta, very powerful scripture that all of us might want to read. So, it is this one Atman that's assuming the form of jivas. See, just like it's this intelligence that's manifested the body. Now, these are connections you would want to make from the outside in. See, dissolving the mind stream is all about dissolving these every day. You think, well, I just dissolve it and that's it, I'm back in nirvana. Good luck with that, you see. No, it's been done by you so often, that it's come outward so often, and it's being done by 7 or 8 billion people every day, and every night it's being taken back. So they've gotten into a habit of projecting and withdrawing without knowing it. Without knowing that they're at the hub of this. They're blaming it on God or devil or nature. See, but it's their own consciousness. It's the power of their own consciousness that's doing this. And that consciousness should not be alien to you. It should be your best friend. In fact, it should be able to give up thought, conceptualization. That's what you're doing in meditation, or trying to do. Give up projection, give up desires. This is your consciousness that can dissolve these. So every day you practice it, once at night, you take it all back. And then you go into sleep and you take it back. See, sleep does it for you really nicely. You struggle with it, you see. But sleep of Maya will take it away just like that. Death will take it away just like that. But you haven't mastered it in those two cases. Death did it for you or sleep did it for you. You need to do this on your own because you are the one that projected it. Or, you want to put it this word, Swamiji says, God is not in the universe is in God. One of his great little pithy points to ponder, or atmic thought bombs, as we're wont to say in Vedanta. So, with just a few minutes left, I took a whirlwind trip through this Chittabhasa so that we would have a better idea of that we concentrated on in these two charts, which is really good for us nowadays because we have been raised in Christianity, some of it fundamentalist. We are subject to the scientific way of thinking. We are materialists, we are sensualists, we are seeking pleasure through objects. All of that is in us, especially the Westerners, but I think in the whole world right now. So this is showing us how to be less violent, to begin. Because this is all a type of violence, you see. The first violence is forgetting your true nature. You've done a great disservice to yourself by thinking yourself to be a sinner, or thinking yourself to be born, or thinking yourself to be created, or your soul to be created. That's a subtle violence that's irreparable if you don't immediately, in this lifetime, put an end to that kind of thinking. I think I will consider myself to be pure and perfect now. The Atman is pure and perfect, you see, and all of its projections are under my control, because I am that, you see. So I become masterful at the level of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, if you want to put it in that way of teaching. See. How do you make your dreams lucid? By making your waking state lucid. You can't just read a book and hope for the best, see, about lucid dreaming. You have to actually worship. There's an altar here. Worship. See. The talk I gave last week at the New Thought Church was all about how to live a spiritual life in the world. Basically, you worship, you study, you meditate, and you act consciously. Those are the 4 yogas. Maybe I'll repeat that here. Can everyone hear that? See? Worship, study, meditate, and act consciously. That is, worship God, not matter or nature. Study the scriptures, not novels and dime store stories, and Grimm's fairy tales and silly stuff. Raise your children on better stuff than that. And meditate on what? The formless Brahman. If you can't manage that, on Ishvara. If you can't manage that, the Dharma. They'll connect eventually. They're all one. And then act consciously. Do your karma yoga. That is, act selflessly for the good of all beings around you. And the 4 yogas will stand you in good stead. I brought that chart. We don't have time to look at it today, of 4 yogas, maybe next week. So this has been our 3rd class on India's Sanatana Dharma. Been kind of a whirlwind kind of blow, like the 2 hurricanes we just experienced the last 4 days. All of you on the mainland may have heard about that. We had Hurricane Madeline go by us on one side, and then Hurricane Lester go by us up on the other side. So we had lots of rain and winds. Thankfully, neither of them made land, so we were just caught in the press. But that kind of whirlwind is what we've been experiencing philosophically here and religiously with the first 3 classes of India's Sanatana Dharma. Next week we'll have the 4th and penultimate class, and that will have to do with the Atman and its characteristics. And then also we will look at Brahman and its epithets. We'll also take a gander at Om, the word, and the beautiful sayings that Vedanta is famous for. Like, I am that thou art, this self is Brahman. And Brahman is pure consciousness awareness, and so forth. And we'll also then maybe look at Om, the word itself, and how the bell, according to Sri Ramakrishna, is the perfect representative of that unstruck sound. So here let's end with a chant. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Srinayama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangaishtushtuvam Sastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayahu Swasti na Indra Vrida Shravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishvadevaha Swasti na Starksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and the Mother of the Universe with perfect health and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.